The election is coming up fast. By the time this video goes up, we'll have just 3 days left to decide whether to protect democracy or embrace fascism. And make no mistake, a vote for Donald Trump is a vote for fascism. So let's talk about it. Now, that word is thrown around a lot in political discourse, but what does fascism actually mean? Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines fascism as, quote, a tendency towards or actual exercise of strong autocratic or dictatorial control. Examples of fascist rulers in history include that of Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini. Mussolini rose to power in 1922 and was voted out of power by his council and later executed in 1945, due in no small part to the extreme economic hardships and loss of civil rights of the citizens of Italy. Hitler rose to power in Germany in 1933 and ruled as a fascist dictator until he committed suicide in 1945 during the events of World War II. Hitler's war on European Jews resulted in the deaths of around 6 million Jews during the Holocaust. Fascism isn't a label that should be thrown around lightly, so the question is, how does Donald Trump compare to Mussolini and Hitler? During his campaign in 2016, Trump tweeted, quote, "It's better to live one day as a lion than 100 years as a sheep," a quote made famous by Benito Mussolini. In defense, Trump said, well, let's just show what he said.
You retweeted somebody from Il Duce 2016. It was a Mussolini quote, but you didn't know it was Mussolini when you retweeted. It said, "It is better to live one day as a lion than 100 years as a sheep." That's a famous Mussolini quote. You retweeted it. You like the quote? Did you know it was Mussolini?
It's okay to know it's Mussolini. Look, Mussolini was Mussolini. It's okay to. It's a very good quote. It's a very interesting quote, and I know it. I saw it. I saw what, and I know who said it, but what difference does it make whether it's Mussolini or somebody else? It's certainly a very interesting quote.
Well,
that's probably why I have,
is a
between
known
Facebook
fascist.
and Twitter, 14 million people,
Do you
and
want
other
to be
people don't.
You want to be
It's a very
associated?
interesting quote, and people can talk about it.
You want to be associated with a fascist?
No, I want to be associated with interesting quotes.
Trump is also currently under fire after his former chief of staff, John Kelly, said in an interview with the New York Times that Trump made a number of remarks stating that Hitler did some good things. Kelly also stated recently in an interview with The Atlantic that Trump raised the idea of needing Hitler's generals when he was in office. In fact, several of Trump's former staffers, the people who work closest with him than anyone, have come out to warn the country of another Trump presidency. Former senior official at the Department of Homeland Security, Elizabeth Newman, told NPR that Trump has an authoritarian tendencies and does not operate under the rule of law. Former senior counsel Kevin Carroll, former deputy press secretary Sarah Matthews, former DHS official Elizabeth Newman, former White House communications director Anthony Scaramucci, former DHS chief of staff Miles Taylor, former White House press secretary Stephanie Grisham, former press secretary for Mike Pence Alyssa Griffin, and Pence's former national security advisor Olivia Troy have all signed a letter in support of John Kelly's warning about a second Trump presidency.
He says, "You're not going to be a dictator, are you?" I said, no, other than day one. We're closing the border and we're drilling. After that, I'm not a dictator, okay?
Former National Security Advisor John Bolton told NBC back in 2022 that while Trump isn't smart enough to be a dictator, he still poses a danger to the country. Now, you might be thinking that surely the United States has a number of fail-safes intact that would prevent any sitting president from becoming a dictator. Well, about that. Let's talk about the Supreme Court and Project 2025. The Supreme Court is the highest court in the land here in the U.S., and many of its rulings have shaped the way we view our laws in this country. When a new member of the Supreme Court is added, that seat is filled until the judge either passes away or retires. When Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia passed away in February 2016, then President Barack Obama quickly named Merrick Garland to fill the seat. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell would then spend the next 11 months stalling Merrick Garland's appointment, irregardless of the fact that this had been the standard procedure to have the sitting president appoint a justice to the seat for more than a century, regardless of whether or not it's an election year. Shortly after swearing in as president, Trump nominated Neil Gorsuch to Scalia's seat in January 2017. In June 2018, Justice Kennedy announced his retirement, and that seat was later filled by Brett Kavanaugh. Following the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg on September 2020, Trump nominated Amy Coney Barrett, and the Senate sped through her proceedings, confirming her seat on October 26, 2020, just a few weeks before Trump would lose the election to current President Joe Biden. For those of you keeping score at home, the same Senate Republicans who refused to hold a vote for Merrick Garland 9 months before an election held a vote for Amy Coney Barrett just 2 weeks before Trump lost the election in 2020. 2 of these Supreme Court justices were names provided to Trump by the Federalist Society. Of the current 9 Supreme Court justices currently sitting on the bench, 5 of them are either current or former members of the Federalist Society, including Brett Kavanaugh, Neil Gorsuch, Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, and Amy Coney Barrett. Keep a hold of that footnote for just a moment. This new Supreme Court has already made a number of landmark decisions that will shape our laws for a generation, from overturning Roe v. Wade to giving near full immunity to any sitting conservative president from the law. The overturning of Roe v. Wade is important, and we will discuss that on this channel one day, but for now, we need to discuss the recent decision regarding Trump's potential immunity. In April of this year, a lawsuit was brought against Donald Trump by the United States government. Quote, a federal grand jury indicted former President Donald J. Trump on 4 counts for conduct that occurred during his presidency following the November 2020 election. The indictment alleged that after losing the election, Trump conspired to overturn it by spreading knowingly false claims of election fraud to obstruct the collecting, counting, and certifying of the election results. The decision to give Trump immunity was made by the conservative Supreme Court on July 21st, 2024. Quote again, under our constitutional structure of separated powers, the nature of presidential powers entitles former presidents to absolute immunity from criminal prosecution for actions within his conclusive and preclusive constitutional authority, and he is entitled to at least presumptive immunity from prosecution for all official acts. There is no immunity for unofficial acts. The problem here is that the Supreme Court did not and has yet to give any context as to what constitutes an official act versus an unofficial act. This indicates that the Supreme Court themselves will decide what acts of a sitting president are official, meaning that any president has full immunity, provided that their otherwise illegal actions align with the currently conservative majority of the Supreme Court. So, yeah. Should Trump be sworn in as president in 2 months, he has full immunity as long as his actions are deemed official by the current Supreme Court. For example, he could, say, turn the U.S. Army on his political opponents like he hinted at here. Roll the clip, Jimmy.
Trump is standing by his words, describing his perceived opponents as the enemy within, the same phrase he used Sunday when he also threatened force against them.
We have some sick people, radical left lunatics. And I think they're and it should be very easily handled by, if necessary, by National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military.
By any standard, this is a remarkable threat, but it's in line with Trump's embrace of authoritarian attitudes.
The guardrails that would have and did prevent Trump from becoming a fascist dictator and clinging on to power in 2020 simply no longer exist. Remember that Benito Mussolini was elected into power in 1924 and Adolf Hitler was elected into power in 1933. As soon as the guardrails come off, a sitting U.S. president can become a fascist dictator, and the last guardrail standing between Trump and full authoritarianism is this Tuesday's election. So that brings us to Project 2025, a guidebook by which Trump, the Federalist Society, and the Heritage Foundation can turn the United States of America into a Christian nationalist fascist dictatorship. Project 2025 is a 900-plus page document that looks to reshape the federal government and consolidate power at the top. While Trump has stated that he has nothing to do with Project 2025 and that he hasn't even read it, the fact is that the authors of Project 2025 are in close connection to Trump. Trump has held private meetings with the Heritage Foundation's president Kevin Roberts and one of its co-founders Edwin Follner. Project 2025 has 307 authors in total, and it's been confirmed that 182 have either worked in Trump's first administration or worked on his campaign or transition teams. Trump's new running mate, J.D. Vance, also wrote the foreword to the book that Roberts is set to release. J.D. Vance, of course, being the replacement for Mike Pence, who dipped out after Trump supporters threatened to have him hanged when they were storming the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. A fact that Trump reportedly was completely apathetic to when his staff informed him of the threat. Project 2025 seeks to replace career positions in local, state, and federal governments with Trump loyalists. It also seeks to dismantle the Department of Education, ban abortion access, roll back protections for LGBTQ individuals, lower corporation taxes from 21% to 15%, and bring the Federal Communications Commission and the Federal Trade Commission under direct presidential control. I'll say it again. This is a step-by-step plan to insert Donald J. Trump as a fascist dictator under the protection of the Supreme Court. And step 1, giving the president full immunity for the undefined official actions, has already been taken. The only way to prevent fascism in the United States is to get out and vote this Tuesday for Kamala Harris. If you don't agree with some of her policies, or if you don't agree with the two-party system in general, I completely understand. However, protest voting or sitting out this Tuesday is akin to playing Russian roulette with 346 million lives. At this point, history will be made on Tuesday. We will either vote in our first female president, or we will vote in our last president. The worst case scenario under Kamala Harris is that things stay the same for 4 years and nothing gets better. But the ceiling for how worse this country can get under Donald Trump is non-existent. We will have time to protest the two-party system and the Electoral College later, but we have to act now to make sure there is a country left for our children. Please get out this Tuesday and vote for Kamala Harris if you haven't already. With that being said, I hope you guys have a fantastic weekend, and I'll talk to you again soon. Peace.